Hi and welcome to the channel. This time around I'm going to bite off more than I could probably chew and look at the history of Batman movies all the way from 1943 to 2022. So we're going to cover a lot of ground here. Buckle up, sit back, and at the end I'm going to review the new movie The Batman, Matt Reeves' movie from 2022, and let you know what I thought about it. Batman himself is about a year younger than Superman. He was created in March 1939 when Bob Kane and Bill Finger got together. Bob Kane had the idea to create a superhero kind of comic, a vigilante with masks and things, and Bill Finger helped him out with the details. They decided they were going to create a vigilante who had a secret identity and who saw a bat and decided that was going to be his persona. It's not an entirely original concept. There were previous characters that kind of had some of the aspects of Batman. Of course, you had the Scarlet Pimpernel, which had the thing of the playboy versus the vigilante. You also had Zorro, of course, which covered this ground before Bruce Wayne ever put on a cowl. And of course, you've got certain aspects of Doc Savage in there as well, particularly the scientific forensic investigation part of Batman. It owes a lot to that. So in 1939, the comics came out, crazily successful for Detective Comics, which is where you get the name DC from. And in 1943, in the middle of World War II, Columbia Pictures did a 15-episode serial in the cinemas of Batman. Now, movie serials were a weird thing. You had to go to the movie 15 weeks in a row to see it. They'd have one episode a week. They ran about 20 minutes each. They always ended on a cliffhanger. Cliffhanger on the first episode of Batman is he gets pushed off a building. Start of the second episode of Batman, the movie serial, is him landing on a painting platform that painters are on. So you get that kind of cliffhanger thing, and then a resolution at the start of the next episode. It got people in. It sucked people into going into the cinemas a lot. And there were a whole bunch of these movie serials as well. There was, of course, Commando Cody, Sky Marshal of the Universe. There was also Captain America and Captain Marvel. And, of course, Superman in 1948, the one with Kirk Allen in it, which is really interesting. If you can get hold of the Superman movie serial, you got to have a good time watching that. So Columbia Pictures did this movie serial with Lewis Wilson playing Batman and Robin being played by Douglas Croft, because Douglas Croft was a short actor with curly hair. Got to be honest with you, the first Batman movie, the Batman movie serial, is racist AF. Got to remember, it came out in 1943, and as they're introducing the secret lair of the major villain, Dr. Dakar, who's a Japanese agent played by J. Carrol Naish, an Irish-American actor, they pan across closed Japanese shops on the street that leads up to the Chamber of Horrors ride, where Dr. Dakar has his secret headquarters. And you get this.
It was part of a foreign land transplanted bodily to America and known as Little Tokyo. Since a wise government rounded up the shifty-eyed Japs, it has become virtually a ghost street.
Yeah. So, first Batman movie was racist. Now, that isn't to say it's not fun. It's got a whole bunch of really cool stuff in it. You have radium-powered disintegrator ray that Dr. Dakar has, and he's trying to steal radium to make a much bigger version of it. And that's kind of cool. You also get some gadgets that the bad guys have, including rotating license plates, 20 years before 007 ever did it. And a really cool gas that can be emitted from the front of a car that changes the car's colour. And we see that as an in-camera effect. And it's very, very cool. So the movie serial was really popular, in black and white, episodic, very low budget. Columbia Pictures wasn't known to be one of the biggest studios at the time. They relied on kind of short subjects for a lot of their money, particularly during the 1940s. They had the Three Stooges, for instance, and did a lot of Three Stooges shorts as well as doing movie serials and things like that. So we've got 1943 settled. Racist, but the first Batman on screen. And it gave us two things that are really crucial to the Batman mythos we have today. First off, it's the first time you ever see the Batcave, and they thought up the idea of the Batcave. Not really well done, but it's the Batcave. And also, before this movie serial came out, Alfred Pennyworth, the butler, was seen as a short, fat guy. But the actor who played him in the movie serial, a guy called William Austin, was a tall, skinny guy with a pencil mustache. And so popular was that the comic books emulated the movie serial. And ever since then, for the most part, Alfred has been a tall, skinny guy with a pencil mustache. So World War II ended in 1949. Columbia Pictures did a second movie serial called Batman and Robin, starring Robert Lowry as Batman. In this one, the major villain was a guy called the Wizard who wore a mask and nobody knew who he was. And he had a machine that would control cars remotely, even if they didn't want them to be controlled. So if anybody was in a car, the Wizard could make them drive off a cliff, for instance. And there were a lot of cliffs because they filmed this on the coast of California for the most part. So in the Batman movie series, you'll see a lot of cars going off cliffs because it's visually interesting and you can do it pretty cheaply. So, of course, that takes us into the 1950s, and the Superman television series was crazily popular. But for some reason, we didn't get a Batman TV series as well. It didn't really work for the studios, I suppose. And, of course, something as effects heavy as doing a superhero TV series or even a masked vigilante TV series wasn't something that any studio picked up at the time. That takes us to 1966, when all of that changed in a big way. We get the 1966 Batman TV series with Adam West and Burt Ward and a host of guest villains. Now, the guest villains in this are crazy. I'm just going to read off the screen down here. You got Cesar Romero as Joker, Burgess Meredith playing the Penguin. You got Frank Gorshin playing the Riddler, the definitive Riddler up until 2022. Eartha Kitt, Julie Newmar, and Lee Merriweather playing Catwoman in various ways. Eartha Kitt's my favourite. And then character actors like Victor Buono, Vincent Price, Rudy Valley, and Baxter Ida Lupino, George Sanders, all playing guest villains in episodes of Batman. Inevitably, there was going to be a Batman movie, and there was, where they brought the whole bunch of the main villains together, the Riddler, the Joker, Catwoman, and the Penguin, and got them going up against Batman on the widescreen in full colour. And I remember going to see that when I was a kid. The movie was crazily popular. It had that crazy kind of comic book weirdness, the vital colours that were in it, the vibrant colours, the over-the-top tongue-in-cheek dialogue, the kind of almost making fun of the way children's television was done in a lot of ways. And a lot of innovative camera work. You had Dutch angles everywhere. You had the on-screen sound effects, which were a big part of it. And it played things for laughs, and it was slapstick, it was silly. You had all of the guest actors and celebrities turning up, sticking their heads out of windows when Batman and Robin are crawling up the side of buildings. All that kind of gear was very much in tune with the kind of zeitgeist of the 1960s. It was irreverent, it was silly, it was fun, it was colourful. It showed us, it was nostalgic without being too referential of the past. And it was crazily popular. I remember the best Christmas present I ever got in my childhood was a Batman utility belt, one of the ones I've got up on the screen right now. And they were great. You got a gun with a suction dart on it, you got a batarang, you got a grappling hook, you got a flashlight, you got all sorts of groovy stuff on there, and it was just the best toy ever for a kid to have. So the Batman movie came out in 1966. Batmania was going crazy. They sold merch galore. Kids were addicted to Batman. There were TV series later on, of course, with cartoons and things. And I'm not going to talk about the animated movies either. I'm just going to go with the live-action Batman movie. In 1966, we also got a Filipino's pastiche of Batman called James Batman, which has got to be seen to be believed. It's a little bit crazy, a little bit low budget, and you can never find a great copy of it. But I thought I'd acknowledge the fact that the Filipinos decided they were going to cash in illegally on Batman, and they did it, and it was very, very popular in the Philippines. So the 70s and 80s were problematic, and even the late 60s for that matter. Batman, people saw as a cartoonish thing. It was for kids. It was pop art. It was not to be taken seriously at all. Meanwhile, the comics were slowly progressing their way towards being a little more relevant, a little more adult, and a little more gritty as well. So you've got to remember the 70s and the 80s in Hollywood was a time when everybody was fueled by cocaine. So they had some really weird ideas about where they wanted to take Batman up to. We had somebody who wanted to do a Batman in space movie, which I can kind of see, but I can't see it being done in the 1970s anyway. There's not going to be cringeworthy. I suppose that may have been a reaction to that movie George Lucas did. They were also talking at the time about emulating the success of the 1978 Superman movie and doing a kind of easing people into Batman with a romantic subplot and making it kid-friendly and making it the kind of aspirational, soft and pastel kind of superhero movie that Superman was. But that came to nothing either. There were a crazy amount of scripts that were written for a Batman movie that was never made at the time. In the 1980s, Tom Mankiewicz, a screenwriter, wrote a script, and here's the casting that they wanted to do for this. Not for the major roles, but for the minor roles. They wanted William Holden to play Commissioner Gordon. I could see that. That would work really well. Problem is, William Holden was quite old and alcoholic at the time. They wanted David Niven to play Alfred. Good casting. I can see that. But here's the one that really grabbed me. Here's really the zinger. Peter O'Toole as the Penguin. Yeah, I can see Peter O'Toole with a cigarette holder, but somewhere in an alternate universe that movie exists and I would sit down and watch it. But then in the 1980s, after Ghostbusters was really big, Ivan Reitman got a hold of Tom Mankiewicz's script and decided he wanted to have a stab at making a Batman movie with Bill Murray as Batman. And if you think that's WTF, they were looking at either Eddie Murphy or Michael J. Fox to play Robin. Now, that didn't come to anything, which is quite fortunate, really, because it would have been a train wreck of a movie. But that's the way Hollywood was thinking about this intellectual property in the 1980s. Then in 1989, they gave Tim Burton a stab at it, and it was successful. They got Michael Keaton to play Bruce Wayne in Batman. Michael Keaton was known as a comic actor, very, very lightweight. People saying things like, Mr. Mom can't be Batman. But he turned out to be pretty good at it. There was still some of Michael Keaton's comic mannerisms in his Bruce Wayne. But between him, the wonderful production design and the direction by Tim Burton, it was a real big success. Of course, you got Jack Nicholson being the secret sauce there, playing the Joker. Though he is a little bit, I'd say 15 years too old to play the role. Jack Nicholson in 1974 would have made a fantastic Joker. Jack Nicholson in 1989 still makes a pretty good Joker. And I watched the movie a couple of months ago, and the most annoying thing in this movie, apart from Princess Bat Dance, is Kim Basinger playing Vicky Vale. Her hair is out of control in that movie. She spends half the movie brushing her hair back away from her face. It was just incredibly distracting during those scenes. And the movie is bombastic and over the top. It played things really large. It played them cartoonish, but still with that Tim Burton sensibility about them. Then in 1992, Tim Burton took his second stab at Batman with Batman Returns, which leaned into Tim Burton's grotesqueness. And that kind of impressionistic production design was really enhanced in that one. But it still kind of was anchored by cartoonishness. You've got Danny DeVito's really repugnant Penguin, who has a tragic backstory, of course. You got Michelle Pfeiffer's damaged and patchwork Catwoman. But I don't think they give her too much to work with for the character. Yes, you do have the arc of her being kind of a nebbish character who gets resurrected by cats. But Tim Burton was never known for his characterizations, and the kind of sexiness was played up there. The big waste in this movie, of course, is Christopher Walken playing Max Schreck. And any movie where you don't use Christopher Walken to go totally over the top and crazy is a waste of Christopher Walken in my book. Then we flash forward to 1995 when Joel Schumacher got his go at Batman with Batman Forever, which sounds a bit like a love letter and probably was to some extent. You got Val Kilmer playing the Dark Knight, and you can tell Val's heart wasn't in it. And both of the main villains, of course, Tommy Lee Jones, Harvey Dent / Two-Face, and Jim Carrey's The Riddler, are pitched at about 11 or 13 in the manic scale, while Val Kilmer's Batman was pitched at about a 5 or a 6. But it's kind of empty. It's all flash, no substance, really. And it isn't until much later that we get substance in a Batman movie, because people are still looking at it as popcorn, tentpole movie, but not to be taken seriously at all. You also get Nicole Kidman as Dr. Chase Meridian. She's more decorative than useful in the movie. And Chris O'Donnell's Dick Grayson is kind of superfluous, because in a Batman movie, what you want to focus on is Batman and the antagonists. Having secondary characters who are heroes as well really does dilute things for me. Then we got Batman and Robin, and George Clooney and the Bat Nipples. Clooney's a charismatic actor. He can make anything work, really. He had his tongue firmly in his cheek playing Bruce Wayne and Batman. But Joel Schumacher's over-the-top production designs really make this movie a little hard to watch these days. Yes, of course, you've got Arnie doing all of the corny lines as Mr. Freeze. And you've got the sexiness of Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl is kind of superfluous. Again, it weakens the main thrust of the Batman franchise, which is Batman being a troubled soul who has to go out and get justice for people because he's driven to do so. You don't get any of that in the Joel Schumacher Batman movies. And the Bat Nipples and the kind of zoom in on the crotch kind of stuff and all that kind of thing just left people feeling a bit, and so they left the movie franchise go for a few years. That takes us up to 2005 and Batman Begins. Christopher Nolan got a go at Batman and really took it seriously. He made the character and the world of Batman international in scope, which was really interesting as well. Batman goes to some very exotic places. You've got Liam Neeson in there as Ra's al Ghul.
Liam Neeson! I'm gonna break it down an octave talking about Liam Neeson's.
You got Michael Caine playing Alfred and giving the character a little depth and a little soul, more than had been done previously, even with the Michael Gough Alfred from the Tim Burton movies. You still got a grounded and realistic and motivated Alfred in the trilogy that Nolan did. It introduces some interesting characters. You've got Gary Oldman's Jim Gordon, who is really good. I'd say he's equal first on the Commissioner Gordons, along with Jeffrey Wright in the 2022 version, but I'm getting ahead of myself there. And of course you get Lucius Fox, played by Morgan Freeman, who is the Q for Batman in this one, and helps him with all the gadgets and the technology. And you get a lot of things about surveillance state in this one. You get a whole bunch of militarized. You get a militarized Batman probably for the first time in the history of the Batman movies. And that's kind of interesting too, because he's going up against powerful enemies. And the Michael Caine Alfred as well is the moral compass for Christian Bale's Batman. And I think that's needed as well, because Christian Bale's a kind of humorless actor at best. And even though he's Bruce Wayne and Batman, he's very focused and determined and kind of grounded. Having Alfred there to humanize him was incredibly useful. This isn't the kind of Batman where you give him sidekicks. What you give him is allies, and having Lucius Fox and also Alfred as his allies really works to make Nolan's trilogy solid Batman. Then you hit 2008 and you get The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger's Oscar-winning Joker. And Ledger's Joker is again a game changer for the franchise. He's unknown and unknowable. He's random. You can't predict what he's going to do. He's an agent of chaos without really a platform and without a motivation apart from causing chaos. He wants to play games and he wants to make people suffer. And the acting of Heath Ledger in that really does show that movie franchises are better the better the villain is. It showed us that Nolan was taking the characters and the intellectual property seriously. Of course, the late Heath Ledger deserved his Oscar. It was a superhero villain like we had never seen before. That then takes us to The Dark Knight Rises, was a movie where Christopher Nolan started trolling the audience. He made half of the people who saw that movie think that they needed to get their hearing checked. And Bane, of course, Tom Hardy as Bane. Having Bane with that mask and being incomprehensible half of the time got us ready for the sound mix in Tenet. But again, it did something really interesting which had been touched on in the Tim Burton Batmans, but hadn't been a major theme in the Batman movies. And that is the Gotham City as a character in Batman. We really got that sense of Gotham being the character because Bane takes over Gotham. And of course you've got Anne Hathaway's Catwoman, who again was there for the male gaze more than anything else, and to give Bruce Wayne his lollipop at the end of the trilogy. But that idea of Gotham being crucial to the Batman mythology is something that we'll see later on. It ends the trilogy reasonably, though you do get that Deus Ex Batplane ending, which I think may have been a misstep. But in the same year that the Dark Knight Rises came out, the game changed again with the MCU. And then DC and Warner Brothers decided they needed to have their own cinematic universe, which gave us Batman in Superman vs. Batman, and also in the Justice League. And I prefer the Zack Snyder version to the other one. Don't like Whedon's version. I really like Zack Snyder's version. And of course you get Ben Affleck playing Bruce Wayne and Batman as an older and kind of war-weary character. He's strategic now. He's getting a little bit off his main stride. It gave us an aged Batman, which we hadn't really seen before that much. Of course, you got that little bit of that in the third Batman movie that Christian Bale did with the back issues and the wear and tear on him. But really, this was the first kind of 40-year-old Batman that we got. And I liked Ben Affleck's Batman. I think it was grounded. I think it felt good. He was self-depreciating in the right amount, but he was still focused and determined and a force to be reckoned with. That takes us to 2022 and the Robert Pattinson Batman. Now, the Robert Pattinson Batman's interesting because some of it harks back to the Michael Keaton Batman in the sense that people didn't think he'd make a good Batman. Now, I watched the movie yesterday. I sat down in my gold class seat and I watched the movie, and it's a good Batman movie. Matt Reeves, who did Cloverfield, does a good job of blending some of the earlier things that have occurred in the Batman mythos in the comic books. He combines Batman Year One with The Long Halloween, which was done as a double animated movie. I talked about it previously on the channel. And he blends a lot of that in together. And for the first time, we see a fully fledged Selina Kyle / Catwoman, using the Selina Kyle backstory that we have from The Long Halloween, and her kind of complex relationship with Carmine Falcone. Zoe Kravitz does a great job as Catwoman. We have the bisexuality of Selina Kyle in there as a given thing in the universe. We get her kind of getting out of her depth and using her smarts, and also playing against male expectations of women to prevail. She plays on men's idea of sexiness to con them in this, particularly in the nightclub scenes. But she's also vulnerable as well. She's got the best motive for Catwoman to exist in any Batman movie. The search for her friend Annika is crucial to her because they had a relationship. And Selina searching for Annika kind of combines with the driven Batman that we've got, who wants to find out the backstory of his own family, and of course who killed his father, why things are happening, and he wants to stop the Riddler from doing what the Riddler is doing, while still getting involved with his family's complex history, with Carmine Falcone played by John Turturro. And John Turturro in this is really good as well. And to be honest with you, Pattinson is really good in this as well. People dissed Michael Keaton when he came in as Batman. People dissed Robert Pattinson when he came in as Batman. But he gives us a Batman for whom Batman is a drug of dependence. Bruce Wayne is hardly there. This is Batman who occasionally has to pretend to be Bruce Wayne. The lank hair that he's got is because he doesn't give a shit about getting a haircut. He cares about, at least in the start of the movie, about stopping crime, getting vengeance. He realizes as the movie progresses that effort that he makes to be a vigilante and stop crime is actually making things worse. His vigilantism has, in a sense, enabled and created the Riddler. And in the Riddler we've got here with Paul Dano's character, is a Riddler who is equal to Heath Ledger's Joker, in the sense that he's an agent of chaos, and it isn't until the last moments that Batman and the authorities realise what he's doing. And it came as a surprise to me. It's perfectly logical, given the hints that we get earlier in the movie. Who Riddler is, why he is, and what he does. And this Riddler plays into a lot of very contemporary concerns about extremists on the fringes of society. It works really well. There's some interesting camera work as well. There's some really oddly stabilized car footage of car chases where the camera's mounted on the side of the car and the car's totally in focus and stabilized, but the background is jittery. So you've got some really interesting processes there that give us a bit of a different look at a car chase. You also get some interesting use of shallow depth of field in this movie in the action scenes, which kind of adds to the chaos of those scenes in the best possible way. Matt Reeves is really thinking it out and thinking out how to make this movie. The movie is, for the most part, set at night, and it's set during a prolonged rainstorm. So you've got that subtext, probably, of climate change, which plays into one of the major climaxes in the movie. But it's constantly raining in Gotham City, and it's constantly night, and nefarious things are happening. Now, the Jim Gordon that we've got in the movie is really good as well. Jeffrey Wright does a superb job as Jim Gordon. Andy Serkis is in there as Alfred. He kind of drops out halfway through the movie for reasons, but I think that his is solid too, and he gives us a working class Alfred, which I always like. There was always that hint of working class in Michael Caine's Alfred, but in Andy Serkis's Alfred, you get a proper Cockney accent, and you get a guy of the streets who lucked on to helping out a billionaire and ending up raising his son. And there's an antagonism between Bruce Wayne and Alfred that we haven't seen in a previous movie, and that plays really well into the damage of the Bruce Wayne character as Robert Pattinson gives it to us. If you haven't seen The Batman, you should really see The Batman. I think it is very much a contemporary Batman movie. I want to see a sequel. I don't know whether there's going to be one. But the interesting thing the Warner Brothers have said about this movie is that one of the things they want to do moving forward with a lot of their franchises is let auteur directors have their way with the intellectual property. And I think that that paid off really well with Matt Reeves. I think that he really took the best of the last 20 years of what we have for the Batman mythology and really nailed it. It works incredibly well. And the Riddler that we get with Paul Dano's character is truly terrifying. And he's terrifying in the way that there's that old saying about the banality of evil. He has the banality of evil really nailed down. There's also a little hint at a future villain in the movie as well. People might know about that, but I'm not going to spoil it. But for me, the movie worked. I think it at the 3-hour length, it's, for some people, a little bit long. Valid criticism. But for me, it worked. I think having that slow build-up and then nailing it with incredible action scenes towards the end really makes this a top-rank Batman movie. Anyway, that's it for this time around. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. You can also support the channel by donating at patreon.com/paleocinema. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. Have a good time. Watch some good movies. Watch some bad movies. Definitely watch some old Batman movies. And I'll catch you next time.